The sleek research vessel cut through space silently, returning to the gleaming world of Tawa. Inside its cargo hold, sealed containers held various life forms from a small blue planet called Earth. Most of these creatures were sedated, but one was awake and watching. Eun-ji adjusted her lab coat and tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear. Her purple eyes, a common trait among her people, scanned the monitoring screens. She was young for a lead xenobiologist, but her passion for understanding other species had earned her this position. Specimen 7 is showing unusual brain activity again, her assistant noted, pointing to a flashing indicator. Eun-ji moved closer to the monitor. Specimen 7 was a human male they had found living alone in a forested region on Earth. Unlike the other specimens, this one seemed to resist the sedation drugs. "I want to observe this one personally," Eun-ji said. Her assistant looked worried. Chief Daeho advised minimal contact. Humans are considered unpredictable. Eun-ji smiled slightly. That's exactly why they're interesting. The containment lab was sterile and bright. Through the transparent barrier, Eun-ji studied the human. The records listed him as approximately 30 Earth years old. He sat perfectly still on the floor of his enclosure, eyes closed as if in deep thought. "Can you understand me?" Eun-ji asked through the communication system, which translated her words into the human's language. The human's eyes opened slowly. They were dark brown and focused immediately on her. He didn't show fear or confusion like the other specimens. Instead, he studied her with clear intelligence. "Yes," he replied simply. "My name is June, not Specimen 7. Eun-ji stepped back in surprise. The translation system shouldn't have been recording their private conversations. The fact that he knew what they called him meant he had been listening and understanding much more than they realized. "You understand our language?" she asked. "Parts of it. I listen. I learn," Jun said. His voice was calm, but his eyes never stopped watching her. "Why am I here?" Eun-ji hesitated. The research protocols were clear. Minimal information should be shared with study subjects. But something about the human's direct gaze made her want to be honest. "We study life from other worlds," she explained, "to learn and understand." June nodded slowly. "Like a zoo." "More like a research center," Eun-ji corrected, though she felt uncomfortable with the comparison. She noticed June's skin looked paler than when they had first brought him aboard. The monitoring system confirmed he was showing signs of illness. The artificial environment, while designed to match Earth's atmosphere, was missing something his body needed. Later that night, when the lab was empty except for the night staff, Eun-ji returned. She carried a small device she had programmed herself. "This will help us communicate better," she said, sliding the device through the small transfer drawer into June's enclosure. "And I've adjusted your environment settings. You should feel better soon." June picked up the device carefully. "Why help me? I'm just a specimen." Eun-ji smiled. "I'm curious. My people think humans are primitive because your technology is less advanced than ours. But there's intelligence in your eyes that doesn't match our data. We have a saying on Earth," Jun said. "Don't judge a book by its cover." "What is a book?" Eun-ji asked. June laughed, the first emotional display she had seen from him. "That's your first question, not what the saying means." Eun-ji found herself smiling in return. "I can guess what it means. Don't judge something only by how it looks on the outside." June nodded. "Your people have judged humans without really knowing us." A warning light flashed, indicating someone else was entering the lab. Eun-ji quickly stepped away from the enclosure. "I'll return tomorrow," she whispered, then composed herself as Chief Daeho entered the room. "Working late, Eun-ji?" Daeho asked, his tone suspicious. "Just monitoring the new specimens," she replied calmly, though her heart was racing. Behind Daeho's back, she saw June hide the communication device. Their eyes met briefly, and in that moment, an understanding passed between them. The beginning of a secret alliance that would one day save her entire world. Over the next 2 weeks, Eunji visited Jun's enclosure whenever she could avoid other staff members. Each time, she was amazed by how quickly he learned. "You speak our language better every day," she said, bringing him a new type of fruit from the Tawa Gardens. Jun accepted the fruit with a nod. "Your device helps, and I have nothing else to do but learn." His containment area now had several items Eunji had secretly brought him. Data tablets filled with information about Tawa society, history, and science. She had broken at least 12 research protocols, but her curiosity was stronger than her fear of punishment. "Tell me about Earth," she said, sitting cross-legged on the floor outside his transparent wall. Jun's eyes grew distant. "Earth is..." He paused, searching for simple words in her language. "Earth is beautiful but troubled. We fight each other over land, resources, beliefs. We damage our planet even though we need it to live." "That seems illogical," Eunji said. "It is," Jun agreed. "But humans are not always logical. We feel deeply. Sometimes our emotions guide us more than our minds." Eunji tilted her head. "My people believe that is why humans are primitive. You let feelings control your actions." "And your people never feel?" Jun asked. "We feel, but we are taught to control emotions, not be controlled by them." Jun smiled slightly. "Yet you risk your position to help me. Is that logical?" Eunji felt her face warm with embarrassment. "Perhaps not." The next day, Eunji was preparing her weekly report when Chief Daeho called her to his office. Her heart beat faster as she entered the sleek room with its view of Tawa's gleaming capital city. "Your reports on the human specimens are interesting," Daeho said, his tone neutral. "Particularly Specimen 7. "Jun," Eunji said without thinking. Daeho's eyebrows rose. "You've named it." "He told me his name," she corrected gently. Daeho leaned forward. "You've been communicating directly with the specimen, beyond basic observation protocols." Eunji took a deep breath. "Yes, and I've discovered that humans are far more intelligent than our initial assessments suggested, based on conversations with one specimen. Based on how quickly he's learned our language, understood our technology, and adapted to captivity," Eunji explained. "Jun has memorized over 6,000 Tawa words in 2 weeks. He understands complex scientific concepts when I explain them." Daeho tapped his fingers on his desk. "Mimicry is not the same as intelligence." "It's not mimicry," Eunji insisted. "He asks questions that show deep understanding. He's taught me things about Earth that weren't in our survey data. Such as their art, music, philosophy, their history of overcoming challenges. Humans have survived natural disasters, plagues, even their own destructive tendencies." Daeho shook his head. "A species that wages war on itself can hardly be considered advanced." "Different, not lesser," Eunji argued. Jun explained that conflict forced humans to become adaptable, to think creatively about problems. "You sound impressed by these primitives," Daeho said with concern. "I think we've underestimated them," Eunji replied carefully. Daeho's expression hardened. "I'm reassigning you to the plant specimens from Earth. Another researcher will take over the human studies." "But that's final," Daeho said. "Your emotional involvement has compromised your scientific objectivity." That night, Eunji slipped into the lab after hours. Jun was waiting, as if he sensed she would come. "They're assigning someone else to study you," she said without greeting. "Someone who won't see you as anything but a specimen." Jun nodded calmly. "What will you do?" Eunji looked at the security panel beside his enclosure, then back at his intelligent eyes. She had a choice to make. "What would a human do in this situation?" she asked. Jun stood up and walked to the transparent wall between them. "A human would follow their heart, even when their mind says it's risky." Eunji took a deep breath and placed her hand on the security panel. The light turned green, and for the first time, the barrier between them slid open. "Where will we go?" Jun asked as he stepped out of the enclosure for the first time. He looked around the lab with new eyes, taking in details he couldn't see from inside. My home, Yunji said, checking the hallway. It's not far from the research center. We just need to avoid the security monitors. She handed him a cloak with a hood to hide his human features. Under the dim night lighting, they moved through the quiet halls of the research center. Yunji's heart pounded with each step. What she was doing went against everything she had been taught about scientific protocol. Yet it felt right. They had almost reached the exit when voices echoed from around the corner. Yunji quickly pulled June into a supply closet. Through the small crack in the door, they watched as two uniformed officers walked past, deep in conversation. Reports confirmed. The Kraveri ships crossed into our outer system yesterday, one was saying. How many? Asked the other. At least 30 battle cruisers. The council has called an emergency meeting. After the officers passed, Yunji and Jun exchanged worried glances. Who are the Kraveri? Jun whispered. A species from a distant system, Yunji explained quietly. There have been rumors of them expanding aggressively, but nothing confirmed until now. You don't sound worried. The Tawa have known peace for centuries. Our defensive systems are the most advanced in this part of the galaxy. Jun frowned. Peace for centuries. Then you have little experience with actual warfare. Something in his tone made Yunji shiver. Yunji's home was a small apartment in a tall, crystal-like building near the city center. Large windows looked out over the glittering capital of Tawa. Jun stood silently at the window, taking in the view of a civilization far more advanced than his own. Your world is beautiful, he said finally. You're not angry that we took you from yours? Yunji asked, setting out some food for him. Jun turned from the window. I was at first. Now I'm curious. And worried. About the Kraveri. He nodded. Your people don't understand war. I can tell. We have defensive technology. Technology isn't enough. Jun interrupted. War requires strategy, adaptability, the ability to think like your enemy. He paused. Humans know war all too well. Before Yunji could respond, her communication device chimed. The screen showed Chief Daho's face. Yunji, report to the center immediately. All research staff are being called in. What's happening? She asked. The Kraveri have sent a message. They claim our research into other species violates some interstellar law they've created. They're demanding we turn over all our research and specimens. Daho's face was tight with concern. It's clearly just an excuse for aggression, but the council is discussing a response. After the call ended, Yunji looked at Jun with worry. They'll notice you're missing. Tell them I escaped on my own, Jun suggested. You need to go. Learn what you can about these Kraveri and their capabilities. The research center was buzzing with activity when Yunji arrived. Screens showed images of large, dark ships positioned at the edge of the Tawa system. In the main conference room, military officers had joined the research team. A tall officer named Hansol was speaking. The Kraveri have attacked 3 other civilizations in the past year. Each time they used similar claims of violations as an excuse. What happened to those civilizations? Someone asked. Hansol's expression darkened. They were conquered. The Kraveri take what they want and move on. Our defenses, Daho began, are untested in actual combat. Hansol finished for him. The Kraveri know this. They target peaceful societies with advanced technology. Suddenly, an alarm blared. All eyes turned to the main screen. 5 Kraveri ships have broken formation, a technician announced. They're heading toward Outpost 7. Yunji watched in horror as the dark ships moved with purpose toward the small research station. The Tawa defense ships scrambled to intercept, but their movements seemed uncoordinated, hesitant. In that moment, Yunji understood what Jun had meant. The Tawa knew about war in theory, but had no experience with its reality. And now war was coming to their peaceful world. Yunji returned to her apartment late that night. Her mind was filled with the images of the Kraveri attack on Outpost 7, The small research station had been destroyed before the Tawa defense ships could respond properly. 23 researchers had died. She found June sitting on the floor, surrounded by data tablets she had brought from the lab. He looked up when she entered. "They attacked, didn't they?" he asked, seeing her face. Yunji nodded and sank onto a chair. "How did you know?" "It's what predators do. They test defenses with small attacks before the main assault." June stood and walked to her. "What happened?" "A research outpost is gone. 23 dead." Her voice shook. "Our ships responded too slowly. They weren't coordinated." "Your people have forgotten how to fight," Jum said quietly. "Or never knew. The council is in emergency meetings. There's talk of surrender, of giving the Kraveri what they want to avoid more deaths." June shook his head. "That won't stop them. Predators don't stop when prey surrenders. They consume it." Imjai looked at him with new understanding. "On Earth, humans fought often. You know about war." "Too much," June admitted. "I was a soldier before I left to live alone in the forest. I fought in 3 conflicts." "You were a warrior." Yunji was surprised. June seemed so gentle, so thoughtful. "I was. That's why I chose to live away from others. I wanted peace." A sad smile crossed his face. "And then your people found me." The next morning, Yunji made a decision. If the Tawa were to have any chance against the Kraveri, they needed help from someone who understood war. "I want to show you our city," she told June. "You need to understand what we're trying to protect." She gave him clothes that would help him blend in with the Tawa. Loose-fitting garments in soft blue colors. With his hood up, only his eyes and the shape of his face marked him as different. They left the apartment building and walked the clean streets of the capital. June was silent, taking in everything. The soaring architecture, the efficient transportation systems, the peaceful faces of the Tawa people who had no idea of the danger approaching their world. "Your civilization is remarkable," he said as they stood on a bridge overlooking a park filled with children playing. "So advanced, yet so vulnerable." "What do you mean?" "I've been studying your history," June explained. "The Tawa solved their social problems centuries ago. No more war, no more major conflicts. It's admirable. But what? Peace made you forget how to defend yourselves. Look at your defense systems. They're designed to deter, not to fight. Your military officers have never faced a real battle." Imji couldn't argue. She had seen the confusion during the Kraveri attack. "Can you help us?" she asked quietly. June looked at her for a long moment. "I need to understand your technology, your defense systems, and I need to know more about these Kraveri." "That information is restricted." "Then find a way to get it," Jum said. "Lives depend on it." That evening, Yunji used her research credentials to access the military database. It was against the law, but she was beyond caring about rules now. As information streamed onto her tablets, Joan absorbed it all with intense focus. "The Kraveri ships have a weakness here and here," he said, pointing to areas on the schematics. "And your defense grid could be much more effective if reconfigured." Yunji watched in amazement as June quickly identified issues that the Tawa military had missed. His mind worked differently, seeing patterns, anticipating attacks, thinking like an enemy. "How do I convince the council to listen to you?" she asked. "They still think humans are primitive. When the next attack comes, and it will come soon, they'll be desperate enough to listen to anyone with answers." Jun replied grimly. "Even a primitive human." As if responding to his words, alarms began to sound throughout the city. Emergency messages flashed on all screens. "KREVARI fleet AP approaching TAHOUA homeworld. All citizens CEK. June and Yunjai looked at each other. The time for preparation was over. The sky above Tawa's capital filled with the dark shapes of Kraveri warships. They moved in perfect formation, like predators circling their prey. On the ground, people rushed to safety shelters as defense systems powered up around the city. "We need to get to the Defense Command Center," Yunji said, pulling Jun through the panicked crowds. "They need to hear what you know." "They won't listen to me," Jun warned. "Not yet. They have to," Yunji shouted over the blaring alarms. Above them, the first shots were fired. Taiwan defense platforms released energy beams that struck the Kraveri ships. The attacks seemed to have little effect. The dark ships continued their advance, barely slowing. "Their shields are absorbing your weapon's energy," Jun observed. "You need to change frequency and targeting pattern." As they reached the research center, security was tight. Guards blocked their way. "Research staff only," one said, eyeing Jun with suspicion. "He's with me," Yunji insisted. "He has information that could help us." "Orders are clear," the guard replied. "No unauthorized personnel." Suddenly, Chief Daeho appeared behind the guards. His eyes widened when he saw Jun. "The missing specimen," he said. "You helped it escape." "Him," Yunji corrected firmly. "And yes, I did. Now he wants to help us fight the Kraveri." Daeho laughed without humor. "A primitive helping us. What could it possibly know about advanced warfare?" The building shook as something exploded nearby. Outside, people screamed as debris fell from damaged structures. "More than you," Jun said calmly to Daeho. "Your defense grid is firing in predictable patterns. The Kraveri are already adapting. Change to random frequencies and scatter targeting." Daeho stared at Jun, surprised by his knowledge and confidence. "How do you—" "There's no time," Yunji interrupted. "The military leaders need to hear him." Another explosion, closer this time. The lights flickered. "Fine," Daeho said. "Bring him, but you're responsible for him, Yunji." The Defense Command Center was chaos. Military officers shouted orders while screens showed Kraveri ships breaking through outer defenses. Commander Hansol stood at the center, trying to coordinate the failing defense. "Our weapons aren't penetrating their shields," an officer reported. "All direct hits are being absorbed." "Keep firing," Hansol ordered. "Concentrate all beams on one ship at a time." "That won't work," Jun said loudly. All eyes turned to the strange human who had entered their command center. Hansol's eyes narrowed. "Who is this?" he demanded. "Someone who knows warfare," Yunji answered. "Please, just listen to him." Hansol looked ready to refuse, but another explosion rocked the building. On the screens, 3 Tawa defense platforms went dark. "What do you suggest?" Hansol asked Jun, desperation in his voice. "Your weapons are predictable. Fire in random patterns, varying frequencies, and don't target their ships directly. Target the space around them. Force them to maneuver." Hansol hesitated, then nodded to his officers. "Do it." The defense platforms changed their attack pattern. Instead of direct hits, they fired in seemingly random directions, forcing the Kraveri ships to move. As they did, some shots got through weakened shields. "It's working," an officer shouted as a Kraveri ship showed signs of damage. "Now combine your ship attacks," Jun continued. 5 ships attacking from different angles at exactly the same moment. Hansol relayed the orders. On screen, Tawa defense ships moved into new positions, then fired simultaneously at one Kraveri vessel. The combined attack broke through its shields, causing visible damage. For the first time, the Kraveri ships began to pull back. "They're retreating," someone said with hope. "No," Jun corrected. "They're regrouping. This was just a test of your defenses." Hansol looked at Jun with new respect. "How do you know so much about battle tactics?" "Humans have been fighting wars for thousands of years," Jun said simply. "It's the one area where our primitive nature gives us an advantage." Hansol turned to Yunji. "Where did you find this human?" "In a forest on Earth," she replied. "Living alone, in peace." "Ironic," Hansol said. We may need his knowledge of war to save our peaceful world. The Tawa Defense Council gathered in an underground chamber. 12 elderly members sat around a curved table, their faces grave. Commander Hansol stood before them, with Yunji and Jun at his side. "You bring a research specimen to our emergency meeting?" asked the head counselor, an old woman named Sunhai. "I bring someone who helped us survive the first attack," Hansol replied firmly. Jun stood straight, meeting their curious stares without fear. Yunji noticed how different he looked from just weeks ago, no longer a captive, but a warrior ready for battle. The human suggestion saved at least 3 defense platforms. Hansol continued, "Without him, our losses would have been much worse." "A lucky guess, perhaps," said another counselor. Jun stepped forward. "Not luck. Experience. Your people have forgotten what war truly is. The Kreveri haven't. You speak our language well for a primitive." "Son," he noted, surprised. "I am primitive only by your technological standards," Jun replied calmly. "In warfare, it is the Tawa who are primitive." Shocked murmurs filled the room. No one spoke to the council this way. "Explain," Sunhai demanded, leaning forward. "Your defense systems are advanced but predictable. Your military has no battle experience. Your tactics assume enemies think like you do." Jun paused. "The Kreveri do not. They think like predators, like humans at our worst. And you understand them because humans are also predators," a counselor asked with disapproval. "Yes," Jun answered honestly. "For much of our history, we were. Some still are. I've fought in wars. I know how attackers think." The council members exchanged troubled glances. Finally, Sunhee nodded to Hansol. "What do you propose, Commander?" "Let the human help us prepare for the next attack," Hansol said. "The Kreveri will return with a new strategy. We need to be ready." "With respect," Jun interrupted, "waiting for them to attack again is a mistake. You must strike first." "Attack." A counselor looked horrified. "Tawa do not start conflicts." "This conflict already started," Jun said. "They attacked first. Now they expect you to cower behind your walls while they plan their next move." Sunhai studied Jun carefully. "What would you have us do?" "Let me work with your military to prepare a surprise counterattack. The Kreveri believe you are weak. Use that against them." After hours of debate, the council finally agreed. Jun would help plan a limited strike against the Kreveri fleet. Hansol would lead the mission, but Jun would advise on strategy. In the days that followed, Jun worked tirelessly with the Tawa military. He taught them about unpredictable attack patterns, about psychological warfare, about thinking like their enemy. Yunji watched the transformation with amazement. The once peaceful researchers and soldiers now trained under Jun's guidance, learning tactics that had been forgotten for centuries on Tawa. "Are you sure this will work?" she asked Jun one night as they reviewed battle plans. "No," he admitted, "but doing nothing ensures defeat." "The council is still not fully convinced," Yunji said. "Some think we should try to negotiate." "The Kreveri see negotiation as weakness," Jun explained. "They respect only strength and surprise." "How did you learn to think this way?" Yunji asked. Jun's eyes grew distant. "On Earth, I fought against people who used terror as a weapon. I had to learn to think like them to defeat them." He looked at her directly. "I didn't enjoy it, but now that knowledge might save your world." Yunji touched his hand. "I'm sorry we took you from your peaceful life in the forest." "Don't be," he said softly. "Perhaps this is why I was meant to be here." The night before the counterattack, Commander Hansol gathered his pilots and soldiers. Jun stood beside him, now wearing a modified Tawa uniform. "Tomorrow, we show the Kreveri that the Tawa are not easy prey," Hansol announced. "We follow the plan our human ally has designed." One young pilot raised his hand. "Why should we trust battle plans from a primitive species?" Hansol looked at Jun, who stepped forward. "Because sometimes," Jun said, It takes a primitive to defeat a predator. Dawn broke over the Tawa homeworld as 20 small attack ships silently left their hidden bases. Unlike the large, impressive vessels the Tawa normally used, these were stripped down, fast, and armed with weapons modified according to Jun's suggestions. In the lead ship, Commander Hansol sat with Jun beside him. "Your plan goes against all our military teachings," Hansol said as they approached the Kraveri fleet's position. "That's why it might work," Jun replied. "The Kraveri expect you to fight like Tawa. Today, you'll fight like humans." Yunji's voice came through the communication system from the command center. "Kraveri ships are in position. They don't appear to have detected you yet." "Good," Jun said. "Remember, no direct approach. Attack pattern Delta, just as we practiced." The Tawa ships split into 5 groups, each taking a different path toward the Kraveri fleet. They used nearby moons and debris fields for cover, moving in ways that would confuse sensors. "They've spotted Group 3, Yunji reported. 2 Kraveri ships are moving to intercept." "Perfect," Jun said. "Group 3, continue as planned. Groups 1 and 5, prepare for attack run." As the Kraveri ships moved to engage Group 3, they exposed their flank. Groups 1 and 5 suddenly accelerated from their hiding places, weapons firing in the special pattern Jun had designed to penetrate Kraveri shields. "Direct hits," Yunji exclaimed. 2 Kraveri ships damaged. Hansol looked at Jun with new respect. The attack pattern worked. "Now for Phase 2, Jun said. "All groups, execute scatter maneuver." The Tawa ships broke formation, each flying in seemingly random directions. The Kraveri, used to fighting enemies who maintained rigid formations, struggled to target them. "Their coordination is breaking down," Hansol observed as the Kraveri ships began to chase individual Tawa vessels rather than maintain their own formation. "They're hunters by nature," Jun explained. "They can't resist chasing what looks like fleeing prey." His eyes narrowed. Now, at Jun's command, the scattered Tawa ships suddenly reversed direction, catching several Kraveri vessels by surprise. More direct hits followed. In the command center, the Defense Council watched in amazement as the small Tawa force began to inflict serious damage on the much larger Kraveri fleet. "The human strategy is working," Sunhai admitted reluctantly. "It's more than strategy," Yunji said. "He understands how the Kraveri think, because humans have faced similar enemies. He knows warfare in a way we've forgotten." On the main screen, they watched as 3 Kraveri ships, damaged beyond repair, began to withdraw from the battle. Others followed, pulling back to defensive positions. "They're retreating," an officer announced. But Jun shook his head in the lead ship. "Not retreating. Regrouping. This battle isn't over." As if confirming his words, the remaining Kraveri ships suddenly formed a tight defensive formation. "All ships, return to base," Jun ordered through the communication system. "We've done enough for today." "We could press the attack," Hansol suggested. "We have momentum, and they're waiting for exactly that," Jun replied. "It's a trap. We've hurt them and surprised them. That's enough for the first strike." Hansol hesitated, then nodded. "All ships, return to base. Mission complete." When they returned to the Tawa capital, Jun was met with a very different reception than before. Officers nodded respectfully as he passed. Even Chief Daeho seemed to have a new view of the primitive human. In the debriefing room, Hansol presented the results to the council. 8 Kraveri ships damaged, 3 severely enough to withdraw from the system. No Tawa ships lost, though 7 sustained minor damage. "An impressive result," Sunhai acknowledged. She turned to Jun. "Your strategy proved effective, human." "My name is Jun," he reminded her gently. "And this was only the beginning. The Kraveri will adapt. We must be ready for their response." "What do you suggest?" Sunhai asked, no longer questioning his authority on military matters. "Bring me the other humans from your research facility," Jun said. Each comes from different parts of Earth, with different knowledge. Together, we can help prepare your people for what's coming. You would have us trust more primitives? A counselor asked, though with less scorn than before. Yes, Jun said simply, because sometimes, to survive the future, you need to remember the past. 3 days passed as the Tawa prepared for the next clash with the Kraveri. Following Jun's suggestion, the other 5 humans from the research facility were freed and brought to help. Each brought different skills. Mina was a doctor, Ta-Jun an engineer, Hyun had been a pilot, Jin-Ho a communications expert, and Su-min knew about computer systems. Together with Jun, they formed what the Tawa now called the Earth Council. The name made Jun smile. On Earth, they would never have been considered important enough for such a title. In the command center, Jun stood before a large display showing the positions of both Tawa and Kraveri forces. They're gathering here, he said, pointing to an area near Tawa's third moon. Their damaged ships have been repaired, and they've called in reinforcements. How many ships now? Hansol asked. 42, Yunju reported, almost twice what they had before. Hansol looked worried. We have 30 ships ready. Even with your tactics, those aren't good odds. Numbers aren't everything, Jun replied. Ta-Jun and Hyun have finished modifying the defense platforms. Su-min has reprogrammed the communication systems to prevent Kraveri interference. We're better prepared now. And we have something they don't expect, Mina added, a plan they won't see coming. The plan had been Jun's idea, but all the humans had helped refine it. It was risky, but as Jin-Ho had said, sometimes you have to gamble big to win big. The council has approved the final preparations, Sun Hai announced as she entered the room. The elderly woman now addressed Jun directly, without the disdain she had once shown. Your people have done impressive work, Jun. Thank you, he replied. But the real test is still to come. As if responding to his words, alarms began to sound. On the main screen, the Kraveri fleet was moving, advancing toward Tawa in full attack formation. They're not hiding their approach, Hansol noted. They want us to see them coming. They think their numbers will frighten us, Jun explained. Fear is a weapon too. He turned to the room of officers and the newly trained teams. But we won't be afraid. The Kraveri ships filled the sky above Tawa, their black hulls blocking the light from the system's sun. On the ground, citizens watched from shelter areas, faces tense with worry, despite the confident messages from their leaders. In the lead Tawa ship, Jun sat beside Hansol as they headed toward the massive enemy fleet. Around them, 29 other Tawa vessels moved in the seemingly random pattern Jun had designed. All ships report ready, Hansol said. Defense platforms are standing by. Jun nodded and picked up the communication device. Begin Operation Deception. 10 Tawa ships suddenly broke formation, speeding directly toward the Kraveri fleet as if launching a frontal assault. The Kraveri responded as expected, concentrating their firepower on these approaching vessels. But the Tawa ships were empty, controlled remotely by Su-min's programming. As the Kraveri focused on them, the real attack began from below. Now, Jun ordered. The defense platforms around Tawa's moons activated at once, firing the special frequency weapons Ta-Jun had designed. At the same time, the remaining Tawa ships circled around to attack from behind. Caught between two forces, the Kraveri ships struggled to respond. Their tight formation, once a strength, became a weakness as they couldn't maneuver quickly. It's working, Hansol exclaimed as the first Kraveri ships began to show damage. But the Kraveri commander was clever. The enemy fleet suddenly split into 3 groups, one continuing to fight while 2 broke away to attack Tawa directly. They're heading for the city. Yunji's worried voice came through the communication system. As expected, Jun replied calmly. Jin-Ho, activate the shield network. A previously hidden network of small devices around the planet activated, creating an energy field that the Kraveri ships couldn't penetrate. Defensive shield holding, Jin-Ho reported from the surface. The city is protected. With their direct path blocked, the Kraveri ships were forced to turn back, right into the waiting Tawa fleet. The battle raged for hours. Ships from both sides were damaged or destroyed. But slowly, steadily, the tide turned in favor of the Tawa. The battle lasted 18 hours. When it finally ended, 27 Kraveri ships had been destroyed or disabled. The rest had fled the system, leaving the Tawa bloodied but victorious. In the command center, tired faces broke into smiles as the last enemy ship disappeared from their sensors. Hansol, wounded during the battle when his ship was damaged, sat with his arm in a medical device. Beside him, Jun looked equally exhausted but calm. "They're gone," Yunji confirmed, checking the long-range sensors. "No Kraveri ships detected anywhere in our system." A cheer went up around the room. Officers hugged each other. Some cried with relief. The other humans from Earth exchanged tired smiles, each having played a crucial role in the victory. "Will they return?" Sun Hai asked Jun quietly. "Not soon," he replied. "Predators avoid prey that fights back too hard. They'll find easier targets. Then we must be ready if they ever do return," Hansol said. "We won't forget the lessons you've taught us." 1 month later, the Tawa capital had been largely repaired. The damage from the Kraveri attacks was still visible in some places, but life was returning to normal. In the grand meeting hall of the council building, a special ceremony was taking place. All 6 humans stood in a line before the full defense council and many high-ranking Tawa officials. Sun Hai rose from her seat at the center of the council table. "Today, we honor those who saved our world," she announced. "For centuries, we Tawa believed ourselves to be among the most advanced beings in the galaxy. We judged other species by their technology, their peaceful nature, their scientific achievements." She looked directly at the humans. "We were wrong. There are many forms of advancement, many kinds of wisdom. The humans taught us that sometimes experiences we thought primitive, conflict, struggle, even warfare, create strengths we have forgotten." One by one, she called the humans forward, presenting each with a glowing crystal, the highest honor in Tawa society. When she reached Jun, she paused. "Jun of Earth," she said formally. "Once our captive, then our teacher, now our friend. The Tawa owe you a debt we can never fully repay." Jun accepted the crystal with a slight bow. "I only did what anyone would do to protect those they care about." His eyes found Yunji in the crowd. She smiled at him, her heart full. The frightened xenobiologist who had first freed him from his enclosure now stood tall and proud, knowing she had made the right choice. Later that evening, Jun and Yunji walked through the gardens outside the council building. Stars shone brightly above them, more beautiful now that they no longer brought fear of invasion. "The council has offered us citizenship," Jun said. "All 6 of us can stay on Tawa if we choose. Will you stay?" Yunji asked, trying to keep her voice casual despite how important his answer was to her. Jun stopped walking and turned to face her. "I left Earth seeking peace in the forest. I found captivity instead." He smiled. "But I also found you." Yunji felt her face warm. "And now I have found where I belong," he said. "If you want me to stay." "I do," she admitted. "Very much." "There's more," Jun continued. "The council wants to send a diplomatic mission to Earth. They want us to lead it." Yunji's eyes widened. "To make formal contact with humans." Jun nodded. "They've realized that judging a species as primitive based on technology alone was a mistake. They want to learn from Earth and share Tawa knowledge in return." "What did you tell them?" Yunji asked. "I said I would go, but only if my research partner agreed to come with me." He reached for her hand. "Earth is beautiful, Yunji. I think you'll like it." Yunji entwined her fingers with his. "I think I'll like anywhere, as long as we're together." Above them, a shooting star crossed the night sky. Once, the Tawa had looked to the stars with curiosity, then with fear. Now, thanks to a human once thought primitive, they could look up with hope again. Sometimes, Yunji thought, the greatest wisdom comes from the most unexpected places, and sometimes saving another can lead to being saved in return.